Hi, I'm Donna Stewart. I'm an artist and a printmaker and a member of the Riverside Print Group. Today I'm going to give you a little behind-the-scenes look at the making of a print of mine, and the print is called Galaxie. And I will take you through the process, the actual printing of Galaxie, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit first about, well, I guess what I want to say is that the actual printing part of things, which is going to take up probably the lion's share of this video, in terms of real time and how I spend my time when I'm making a print, it's just a small fraction of the creative process. And typically with the printing, it's the very last thing that I do. The image is already finalized in my mind and on paper, and I know exactly how it's going to turn out. So there's always room for, there's always some margin of error. There can be some surprises. But for the most part, I know exactly what I'm going to get before I approach my printing press, which you see right here. So, having said that, I'm assuming a certain familiarity with the medium of print, but I just wanted to say a couple of things about that. And I guess for those of you who don't know, what I would say is that printmaking is just another way of making a picture. But it's a little different from things like drawing, which you might already be familiar with. With drawing, the artist is taking a pencil and making a mark directly on a piece of paper. With printmaking, however, there is this intermediate object or objects called a plate. And the artist actually makes their mark on the plate. Then they apply ink and pressure to the plate, and the act of doing that transfers the image to a piece of paper. So if we're looking again at Galaxie, I can show you, I think I've got 5 or 6 plates here that actually went into the making of this. So I can show you in the center of the print, there's a silhouette of a couple, and here is the plate that I inked up in black and printed to get that effect. And we'll be looking at all of the different plates in turn. Basically, there's one for each color. So I guess I'll say, getting back to my creative process, the way that I work may be a little different from the way that you work, but I'll say that I do keep, I'll say I'm a collector of images. I keep several file folders where I store them, and they're sort of organized by project. I've got paper ones in my studio. I've got digital ones, mostly on my computer, but I've got some of those on my phone as well. And what I like to do is add to them frequently, but also flip through them, kind of page through them. And I'm looking for something that is really going to catch my interest, fire my imagination. And I'm also looking to be able to draw relationships, kind of juxtaposing images and ideas and combining, recombining, constructing, deconstructing, if you want to think of it that way. And with this particular print, the catalyst, what really got me thinking, what really moved me, was the fact that my mother sold the family home in the summer of 2021. So And just a little backstory. So my parents built that house in 1957. They lived there their entire married life. And it was the only home that my siblings and I really knew. And so when it came time to prepare the house for sale, you can imagine it was a veritable time capsule. It was absolutely chock full of memories. And a lot of those memories took the form of photographs. And a lot of these photographs I had never seen before. And yeah, so they were new to me. And I'll say that I kind of fell in love with this image in particular. I'll hold that up so you can see it. Hopefully you can see it there. And it's a picture of my mom and dad before they were married and before they were my mom and dad. It's the mid-1950s. You can see my dad's haircut. My mom's got the saddle shoes on. They're on a date at the beach. And they're probably, I'm going to say they're probably about 20, 21 years old. And I just, like I say, I just love that image and everything that it represented to me, all the best things about, I'll say, their relationship and youth, right? And looking forward to the future. So all those things. Anyway, when I saw this, I was really determined that I would, what I wanted to do, having processed all of that stuff, and a lot of emotions too, processing an awful lot of emotion. What I really wanted to do was find a way to use this image as the central part of, I'll say, a visual retelling of the story of my family. So that was the goal that I had, and this picture plays an important part. The print that I want to, take you through today is actually called Galaxie, and it's part of a larger series of work. The title of the larger series is Made in Preston, and you can surmise from that comment that the family home is in Preston, so that's where I was born and raised. But I called the print, I called it Galaxie, and the spelling is a little bit unusual. So most of you astronomers are familiar with Galaxie spelled the traditional way, ending in a Y, and representing, a collection of stars and other material, all kind of bound together by gravity. But this galaxy is spelled a little differently, and that's because it isn't connected to NASA. It's a car. And so, in fact, it's a 1964 Ford Galaxie 500 XL. I've got to get that right or my brother will kill me. But that was my father's very first new car. And, I think we all loved that car. We had so many happy times with it, trips. As we got older, the kids, and we married, the car would be used to chauffeur brides and grooms, from the church to the reception venue, and I learned to drive in that car. Anyway, my dad maintained it in its original condition. And when he passed away, the car went to my brother. So my brother's got it now, and it's still an important part of, I think, his family story now. So anyway, that's where the name comes from. Sorry, it's that car. black Ford Galaxie 500 XL, red leatherette interior. When I was thinking about my image, you know, I've already got my parents. I've got this silhouette from that first photograph that we looked at. And I'm taking the name or the title of the print from the car. But then I started thinking about other associations and kind of deconstructing the car a little bit more. And I sort of fixated on, hopefully you can see that, I fixated on the taillights of the car. They're very stylized, very distinctive, very 1960s. And when I looked at them, I thought, that looks like a sun. That reminds me of the sun. So that's what it came to represent for me in the print. And here's more of a close-up at the very bottom here, more of a close-up of the taillight of the car. So the pieces started coming together for me that way. The final element was the stars. So I've got this central figure. I've got this sun, possibly a setting sun in a night sky. The car is black. The night sky is sparkling. Well, that sort of implies that I needed some stars. And the final piece of the puzzle was when we were going through the house. I think my sister and I all did it, but we were taking pictures of the different rooms. You know, still had the original kitchen, the original bathroom. And so the 8 pointed stars that you'll see in the Galaxie print were actually suggested to me by the, I'll say, mid-century modern countertop in my parents' bathroom. So, you know, this beautiful turquoise plastic tile on the walls and this wonderful pattern on the counter. So that's a little bit of insight into what inspired me. But I will say, let's get down to the nuts and bolts. Let's make a print. So I've got, maybe I'll give you a quick little tour of my workstation here. I'm set up for printmaking paper, and we'll talk in more detail about that. I've got 16 pages of notes, and this is something that I guess I do want to add. I am a visual artist. It's the images that speak to me and fire my imagination. But when I'm thinking about the work, I find that I probably write more than I doodle or sketch. And so for this Made in Preston series of work, I started a notebook, and I've got 16 pages of, I would almost call them journal entries that I made over several months. And not all of the, you know, it's kind of a conversation I have with myself. I find it helps me to clarify what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and not all of the ideas bear fruit, but a handful of them do and result in prints that hopefully you'll see someday in a gallery. So there's a lot of working through of concepts that goes on in my writing, but then also there are practical notes. So for example, in the Galaxie print, I was going for a particular shade of red. You know, I wanted it to look like Campbell's tomato soup red. So I played around mixing some colors until I got that formula. So, you know, I've got my notes here so that I can refer to them when I'm mixing up the ink. This is probably the smallest etching press that you will ever see. But it's a lovely machine made by a Dutch company, Polymetal. Configured in this way, It'll take, I will say it will take about an 8 by 10 inch plate. And I just love it. I'm really delighted to have it because it means that I could keep working even though, conditions have been challenging for many of us in terms of access to larger presses and studios and things like that. So it's been really great. I'm going to be working with 3 different colors of ink, and so I've got 3 different inking slabs. I've got 3 different brayers, 1 for each color. And yeah, so let's just get started, and I'll start mixing up my ink. So I'm going to start. I like to work from the lightest color to the darkest color, and that way I can reuse some of my tools. Things like this putty knife for, I'll say, working the ink, exposing it to the air, helping it to warm up, giving it the right consistency that I need for rolling it out onto my plate. So the first color that I'm going to, actually, that isn't true. Believe it or not, this is Nasturtium Yellow. It sure looks orange to me. And I love this color. And I should also add that all of the inks that I'm working with are by a company, it's a French company called Charbonnel, and they are all oil-based, but not oil-based in a bad way, oil-based in the sense that linseed oil is the medium in which the pigment is suspended. And that means a couple of things. For me, it's important that I can clean up after myself in, there's no such thing as non-toxic. And if someone says something is completely non-toxic, I think they maybe need to look a little closer at their processes. But what is possible is that things can be less toxic and safer. And so to clean up after myself, I will cut the oil-based ink with vegetable oil. And then I cut the vegetable oil with dish soap and water. So, relatively benign substances. And I say that, and I don't mean to be a smart aleck, but even Johnson's baby powder, we've discovered it's been in the news, and it's not been that benign substance that we all thought it was all those years ago. So just be careful. Just always be careful with your product. The other reason I like to use the oil-based ink and not, there are some really nice water-soluble ones on the market now. The reason is that the plates that I'm using to make this print are actually made of recycled cardstock. So they're essentially made of paper, and it's a pretty tough, durable paper. Here's the plate that gives me the night sky, and if I flip it around, you can see that I cut my design out of an old poster from another show that I participated in. And paper doesn't do too well with water, but it holds up pretty well under the oil-based ink. So that's, another rationale for my choice. And all of my plates are made out of this recycled cardstock. It's a really versatile material to use for plate making. So easy to cut. You can cut just about anything into it, as you can see. So back to the inks then. I'm going to start by this is Permanent Yellow Lake, and I'm amending both my orange / Nasturtium Yellow and my red, my geranium red, with this. I'm adding it to the nasturtium because I want my orange to look a little fluorescent. I want it to fluoresce. So I'm adding some yellow to it to get that quality. And then I'm going to add yellow also to the geranium red because, as I said, I'm wanting that, the color of Campbell's tomato soup. That's really what I'm going for. So I look here at my notes and I see that I'm using 2 parts yellow for 1 part red. So I'm just gonna I guess that's about a centimeter's worth. I'm only going to do 1 print today. If I were making a whole bunch, I'd be a little more liberal with my ink. And I'm just going to nip over here to grab a piece of paper towel to wipe the neck of the tube. It's really important to kind of clean up after yourself as you're going. If you don't, it can be awfully hard to get the cap off the tube later. So excuse me for just a minute. Actually, that was a bit premature because now I'm going to squeeze a comparable amount onto the second slab. Now I'm going to clean up like I really mean it. I think I'm going to put the red there because I've got a little more yellow there. So as I said, this is a geranium red, and it's kind of my go-to red. They give it the fancy name geranium, but it's actually, the company calls it their primary red. Wiping down the necks, not putting the caps back on just in case I don't have the proportions quite to my liking. Okay. So I'm going to start, I don't know if you can see that. I don't think it's going to run down the slab, but I've got my 2 colors, and now I'm going to use the putty knife to mix them together. One of the things that makes printmaking challenging is that there are so many variables. So even though I've got a recipe in front of me, you know, things like the humidity in the room, the temperature can affect the way that my ink behaves. And there are other things that I might use to amend it. You know, I can make it looser by adding an oily substance, and the one that I don't use burnt plate oil anymore. I've discovered that lavender oil does the job just as well, maybe even better, and it smells nice. So it smells like you're like you're at a spa or having a little aromatherapy session. And so I think I need a little more yellow. That isn't fluorescing quite the way that I'd like it to. And I don't know, probably, there are a couple of cameras working to capture this. But when I'm pulling the ink down and I raise my putty knife like that, I'm getting a tail. The ink is kind of clinging to the putty knife, making a little string. I don't want it to be too loose because this is, I didn't mention it, but this is actually a relief printing technique. So it needs to be somewhat stiffer than an ink that I would be using if I were doing lithography or etching. But yeah, I think I'm pretty content with the consistency of that one. So I'm just going to set that aside. Now I'm going to work with my red. And you can see the ingenuity of starting with the lighter color and working with the darker one now. Because having a little bit of ink still in a little, sort of, I'll say, orangey ink left on my putty knife, nobody will be any the wiser. Because this color is going to be stronger and darker. And the orange will actually contribute to that, that tomato soup color that I'm going for here. Yeah, I like that. I really like that. I think that looks pretty good. The strings are an appropriate length. Okay. And if you'll just excuse me for a second, I can now say that I am done with this. So I'll cap it. Done with this as well. It's kind of like being in a garden, you know? There's a primrose yellow. That's not the one that I've got, but you got primrose, nasturtium, geranium. Kind of inspiring, really. Okay, so I will set that there for now. The last thing that I'm going to do is prepare my black. And basically, so for relief printing, I like to use a carbon black. I use a different, how many blacks could there possibly be? But in fact, quite a few. I actually use a different black when I'm printing an etched plate. I won't go into the details, but just the, yeah, I don't know, just the quality of it. I think the texture of it. This carbon black seems to work really well for, I use it a lot for relief printing. I use it for lithography too, just not for etching. So, and the black ink is going to be unamended, meaning I'm just using it right out of the tube. I'm not, not adding any other colors to it, not adding any loosening or stiffening agents to it. Okay, but I do want to work it a bit on the slab, stretch it out, loosen it up. And actually, you know, when I look at my print here, I'm noticing that the majority of the paper surface is black. So I'm looking at the amount of ink that I've got on my slab and going, I think I don't have enough black ink on my slab, so I'm just going to add that same quantity again. And I'm sort of pulling on the tail of the tube and squeezing the top of the tube, trying to encourage the ink to go back inside the tube. So there's less waste and less for me to wipe up, if I can do that. Something that's really handy to have in your printing kit is, I guess I will call them vice grips for loosening. Sometimes no matter how careful you are, it feels like the lid gets welded to the neck of the tube. Of course, that's never my fault. I'll blame that on all the people who've borrowed my inks in classes and things like that. But sometimes it happens. But it's really handy to have for painting as well, tubes of paint. Okay. There will be a payoff soon. You gotta trust me. Gee, I hope that's enough. I guess we'll find out. Okay. At this point, I'm ready to start inking up my plates. And as I said, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 of them, and you might go, 6. I only see 5 discrete ones, but in fact, to get my starry sky, and I wanted to have the star kind of running off the page, so to speak. So I actually had to make, this is probably the smallest plate you'll ever see, but it's just a little corner of the night sky that I have to fit into my little puzzle. It's a lot like assembling a jigsaw puzzle, it really is. Because the inks are oil-based, they've got an incredibly long open time. So my preference is to prepare my inks, ink all my plates, and then prepare my paper and think about my registration. And with a multicolor image and multiple plates, registration is incredibly important. There are probably as many different ways of achieving good registration as there are printmaking artists, but I'll show you shortly what I do to get that. So let's start. I don't want to lose this guy. Okay. Oh, and excuse me. You will notice in the print there is I'll call it a gray circle, and in other versions of the print, I think I actually prefer a little more gray, a little less black. But what I've done to achieve that, I'm actually working with a textured paper. So this is also recycled cardstock. But it was actually the cover from a book of Bristol board. with a smooth vellum finish that I bought that I had been using to make plates. So I just thought, that's a nice texture on that cover. So I thought I would make a plate out of that. And I think maybe what I'll try to do is, well, I'll show you, but I think maybe a ghost of this will give me more the effect that I'm going for here. So let's get started. So this is my orange center of the tail light. And you can see I've made some markings on here. The ink is translucent. I've made my markings using, it's just a Sharpie, a black Sharpie, but it's permanent, it doesn't bleed, and it lets me orient this properly on my registration grid, which I will show you in a few minutes. So I'm just going to lay the plate here on this newsprint that I've put down to protect my surface. And I'll bring the orange ink over here where I can reach it. And I'm gonna get a little bit on my brayer. You know, you can get brayers made of different materials. I find that if the plate surface is soft and kind of yields to the touch, so like a soft oleum plate for lino cut, then I like to work with a hard rubber brayer. But when my plate surface is pretty unyielding, then I prefer to use a soft material. So that's what I've got here. And I don't know if any of you have ever painted a room in your house before, but the same advice that, you know, an experienced painter would give you is kind of what you want to do when you're inking the plate as well. So you're better to put on several thin coats of ink. You're going to be much happier with the result than putting on one, you know, very thick, globby coat. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. I'm looking for, again, it's probably very difficult to see, but when I roll the ink out to a thickness and consistency that I'm happy with, it looks kind of satiny, and it makes, it might only be audible to me because I'm so close here, but it makes the faintest little hissing sound when I'm running the brayer over the surface. Okay, so okay, that's coat one. Now I'm going to recharge my brayer. I was doing, I'll call that a sort of a vertical roll, and what I want to do to make sure I get good even coverage, I'm going to recharge the brayer, pick up a little more ink. Spread it out nicely on the slab. And now I'm approaching it horizontally, the horizontal roll. And you probably can guess that diagonal is coming next. really with printmaking, what you see is what you get. So, you know, I've got my eye on the plate as I'm rolling the ink out. I'm looking for, I want to see a nice even coating. I don't want to see anything accumulating more in one spot than another. And I can get, it's kind of hard to tell just by looking at the plate how much ink I'm getting on there, because it's already orange from the last time that I used it. I just let the ink dry. I didn't clean it off. And the reason for that is, it's almost like I'll say kind of it's a quality that lithography makes use of. So oily ink attracts more oily ink. So it's in my interest to let the ink stay there. Makes it easier for me to ink up for a second, third, whatever print. So I think I'm going to do one more for good measure, and then we can move on to the red. Oh, but anyway, I probably didn't finish that thought. By looking at the newsprint around the plate, I get a pretty good idea of what kind of coverage I'm getting, and I think that looks pretty good. Just even it out there. Okay. Okay. I think I'm happy with that. So we'll set that aside. Okay, now I'm going to be working with the red ink bearing plate. I'm going to set that here. I've got a separate brayer, a wider one. This one, I think this is only 2 inches wide. This one is 6 inches. 6? No, 4. 4. Well, I'm not going to get a ruler out to measure it, but it's wider for a larger plate. Same idea as with the orange. I'm rolling some ink out on the slab. Just a little aside, like with printmaking is a little bit like watercolor painting in the sense that with watercolor, if you want white, then you get white from your paper. So you protect the part of the paper that you want to appear white so that you don't get any paint on it. And the same thing is true with printmaking. If I want white, that's going to be my white paper showing through. So those are the areas where there won't be any ink. Really loving this color. A friend of mine, she's actually a ceramic artist, but she uses lithographic techniques to transfer images to her pottery. And she invested a lot of money in a new brayer, and she wanted to pick my brain about how she should care for it. So I talked to her about the steps that I follow. And it's so important to take good care of your tools. They really are expensive, and they can last for a very long time, and they affect, you should buy the best that you can afford. They affect the output that you produce. But my key advice to her was, I was recommending the oil, vegetable oil, and soap and water regime. But the crucial thing is that they can't go down dry, or pardon me, exactly the opposite. They can't go down wet. If there's any moisture at all on the soft rubber of the brayer, it starts to, it's almost like a corrosive effect, but before long you'll find that the brayer has become kind of gummy and it doesn't release the ink the way it should. So I'm not going to show you my cleaning up process, but what I like to do after the oil dish soap routine, I take a clean piece of newsprint, and that's what I use. I just roll the brayer over the newsprint. That's how I dry the surface. I did a residency a couple of summers ago in Massachusetts, and they went one step further. So that's where I learned all that stuff from ZMAs in Massachusetts. But the other thing they do, they put, it's, I guess it is kind of like a talcum powder. They actually dust the soft rubber surfaces with this desiccant, and then they hang them up to dry. They have like a pegboard, and they hang them up to dry and store them that way. My hands are staying remarkably clean throughout this process, but I did get a little bit of red ink on me. That's what the apron's for. So I'm going to say, based on the coverage of the newsprint around my plate, I guess I'm doing one more for luck, but I think that's pretty good. Oh, something else that you should notice. When I'm setting my brayer down, I'm always resting it not on the soft rubber, but on the hard bracket that holds the rubber roller in place like this. And I'm doing that for a few reasons. First of all, I don't want to get ink all over my tablecloth. But the other reason is it'll get flat or creased. Like if you put it in a box where the flap of the box is resting against the soft rubber for any period of time, you'll get a line, a permanent line in the brayer. And for the same reason, you don't want to store it like that. It'll start to go out of true. Okay. Getting there. Now we're on to the black. So now I'm doing my stars. I guess I can put it there. Probably do a time lapse on this stuff because it's kind of repetitive. Tremendously satisfying when you're doing it, but maybe not so much fun to watch. I'm just trying to get all the angles here. Trying to get the best coverage that I can. I wish I had lights that were this good in my home studio, because, you know, I'll say there's a lot of informed guessing that you do, you know. But I think I've got pretty good coverage here. Just, I can see the way that the ink is glistening in the overhead lights. And that's something that is sometimes hard for me to see in my studio at home, but this is pretty good. Maybe one last coat. Okay, I think that's pretty good. This is my favorite plate to ink, the little people. So I'll do them next. They're a nice size. The width and height are just right, so I can cover the whole plate with one pass of my brayer, whereas that's not true with the larger plates. Oops, get this stuck here a bit. I think that's good. Now the little tiny plate. I have to be careful with the tiny one because it's so small that it can actually get wrapped around the brayer and lift right off the newsprint. I think that's good. So the only thing left for me to ink now is my textured ring. Kind of running out of spots on the clean spots on the newsprint, but I think this would be fine. And this, you know, the diameter of the circle again is such that I can, if I'm careful, I can hit the whole thing with one pass. That's nice. I mean, you can get wider brayers, but they're, I mean, the price goes up exponentially. And with this one, I want to get an even coat, but I don't want to go too crazy. because I'm probably going to, I guess I have to decide, but I think I'm probably going to remove some of that ink and create a ghostly effect by pressing on it with my, printing it by hand with some newsprint first. Okay. So now all my plates are inked. I'm ready to prepare my paper, and my hands are relatively clean, but not perfectly clean. So I'm just going to step over here. Grab a wipe. Whoops. And this isn't a product placement or anything, but I do find these are remarkably good for cleaning up inky messes. If you're printing on plein air and you're not close to a sink or something like that. And one time I even had it, the first and only time that I printed without locking the cats up in another room in another part of the house. And one of the cats strolled through across my inking slab. And then instead of sort of coaxing him away, I sort of freaked out. So naturally he took off running, and I had this beautiful violet shade of ink tracked all over my beige carpet. But the good news is a Lysol wipe lifted it up perfectly. So that's, that's good. Okay. I am ready to prepare my paper. Here it is. Okay. The printing paper that I'm using, I think everybody's got their preference, but Fabriano Rosa Spina is one that I've used a lot for my relief work, and I'm happy with the results. They're pretty predictable, and the color, the white color, again, it's kind of like with black. Who knew there could be shades of white? But there are. And this particular paper looks well with the color of mat board that I habitually use. And there's a color of Japanese paper that I often use when I'm doing chine collé, which is a kind of print-based collage technique. So anyway, those are my reasons. Strictly speaking, with relief work, you don't need to use damp paper the same way you would if you were making an etching. But I find I like to dampen my paper because even with, these are fairly low relief plates, these plates that I've made out of the cardstock, but I still get a nice embossed quality when I use the damp paper, and I just like that. I think I get better ink transfer because I think the paper's a little bit more malleable. So, anyway, I'm going to soak my paper, and I'm stepping over here. I've got a small utility tray, and I've got a little bit of just tap water in there. And my paper is roughly 10 inches wide by 14 inches long, so it's not going to fit perfectly in my tray. But now that I've got clean hands, I don't. Now that I've got almost clean hands, I'm going to soak the paper for about 90 seconds, give or take. And I'm trying not to crease it. Paper is fragile, and damp paper even more so. But I'm just trying to ensure, as with everything else, I'm trying to get good coverage, good absorption of water. And periodically, I'm testing the malleability of the paper, just trying to see how flexible it is. One of the things you find with printmaking, especially etching, you put all this ink onto an etched plate, and then you wipe most of it off. And the same thing is true with water. You're absolutely drenching the paper in this bath. But then in 30 seconds or so, I'm gonna blot most of it away. So it's that kind of process, really. I think we're getting there. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds, I think. The Fabriano paper is mold made, so there will actually be a watermark along two edges of the paper. You just want to be aware of that, because likely you don't want that to intrude in your finished print. The watermark can also help you to determine which is the right side of the paper on which to print. Personally, I guess there's a right side and a wrong side, but sometimes I like the texture on the wrong side better. So honestly, it's just a matter of preference, I think. But just be aware of it. Like, make a conscious choice. Don't let it be an accident. Okay, so now that the paper is well and truly soaked, I'm going to hold it up by its edges, and I'm holding it on an angle, and you can see the water and probably hear it draining off, and that just helps. Why blot it if I can have it drip away? Okay, and then I've got my towel here, and I'm just going to blot the excess water. I think of this as kind of a brushstroke. Good exercise. My towel's got a bit of lint on it. It's not too bad. Flip it over. Repeat. And basically, what I'm doing is trying to absorb the excess moisture. If in these excellent lights I can actually see little puddles on my paper, then I haven't blotted it enough, and I need to get rid of more of the water. But I think we're pretty close here. So the finished print, the image itself is 8 inches by 8 inches, and I trim the paper to 10 by 10, and I mat it. The window of my mat is 9 by 9. So you might be saying, well, wait a minute, didn't you say your paper, maybe I didn't tell you, but my paper is 10 by 14. Why am I using such a long piece of paper? And you're going to find out now. So I think that looks good. Okay. I am going to flip back the blankets. And with this particular press, it's not geared. It doesn't have any kind of assistance. And so what I do is I turn the wheel in the direction that I want the press bed to go. And I'm advancing it a little bit. Because what I'm going to do, this is why I wanted the longer paper. I'm going to put my paper in position first. I think that's pretty good. It's a little hard to see the white paper on the white. Trying to center it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. And then what I'm going to do is advance the press so that the roller of the press that's applying the pressure is actually going to pin my paper in position. So it's not going to move on me. Yeah, that's being firmly held in place. So that's going to help me with my registration. And I'm just sort of visually inspecting. I've got about an inch to the back support bar, so I don't want to roll beyond that, or the paper will come loose. So now my paper's in position, and I can start putting my plates onto my press bed here. And before we got started, I actually I made a copy of my registration grid. And I taped that to the board, or to the press bed. And then we're only doing one print, so maybe I didn't really need to do this. But if I were making multiples using the same grid, I have actually taped a piece of acetate, clear acetate, over top of my paper registration grid so that I can clean it up easily with, today I'll probably use Lysol wipes because that's what I've got, but you know, at home, I might use Windex. So now it's time, to position the plates according to my grid. And I'm going to start, I'm actually gonna run this through the press 3 times to get the desired effect. So the first thing that I want to position is my orange circle in the center. Oops. So I'm trying to pick it up carefully by the edges. And then I'm going to place it on the grid. And I mean, with the circles, you know, it doesn't matter so much that I have everything lined up, but that looks pretty good. So the orange plate is in position. The next thing that I'm going to add then is the red plate. And I just nudging it slightly. Don't want to move things around too much. There's a bit of an inky buildup on the underside of the plates, and I can see where there is now a little tiny bit of red ink on the acetate because of me moving things around. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. I mean, I could go after it with a Q-tip, but I would probably only make things worse for myself. So what I will do after the print is made and dried, there's a process that printmakers do to, I'll say, salvage and repair prints when things have gone wrong. So a simple white eraser, once everything is dry, and very gently, I'll be able to lift little smudges and fingerprints of ink off of the paper. So I think I prefer to repair it after the fact than try and fix it now. So I've got red and orange in position. The next thing that I'm adding is the big black plate. Okay, not too bad. And then I'm going to take this teeny tiny plate. Oops. Oops, it's sticking to my finger. Okay, that's not great. I think I'm going to go with that. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I've got a little bit of, I think I really went to town with the ink, so I'm getting a little bit of, yeah. You know what? I can't resist. I'm actually going to take the Lysol wipe and try and tidy that up a little. Okay. Not bad. I think that's probably all I dare do. Okay, so, so this is going to be pass 1, and I'm going to very slowly and gently, so that I don't jostle the plates around. I've got my paper in position, okay, and then my blanket is down, okay, got about an inch here, and I'm going to go this way first. Let me just get that out of the way. And I like to go through in both directions. And I'm keeping a close eye because I want my paper to stay in place. Now I'm going to take a little peek. Okay. And I'm looking, it's probably hard for the camera to pick up, but I'm looking at my paper to see if there's a decent embossing in the back of the paper. And I think there is. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to peel the blankets back. And I'm going to okay. Yeah, not bad. All right. Now, I am going to, wow. There. Okay. This little tiny plate is well and truly welded to the surface. So, I suppose strictly speaking, I don't have to do this, but I like to clean up the acetate before I put the second plates through here. So, and it takes a little elbow grease, but the Lysol wipe, whatever it's saturated with, Lysol, I presume, is actually picking up a lot of the inky residue. And it doesn't have to be perfect because, you know, again, the paper is going to, you know, if I've done my registration properly, the paper will fall in the same spot. But I'd really like to keep my whites white, you know. Sounds like a laundry commercial. Okay. Okay, I think that's got it. Good enough. Okay. Now this textured plate has been kind of problematic for me. And so, what I think I'm going to do is flip it over like a jelly sandwich. No, what I'm going to do is take this other paper that I've got. I use it kind of like like I would use newsprint. Actually, I probably don't have to use 2 pieces. Just going to take some of the excess ink off there. Maybe a little more. I mean, the pressure of my hand can't really compare to the pressure of the press. So I think as long as I've removing it evenly. Maybe a little more. Okay. Well, okay, let's see what this will give us. Okay, looks pretty good. My hands are dirty again. Honestly, I don't know where the ink comes from. Well, I do. But I don't know how it gets on my hands all the time. That is a mystery. Something that I should have done that I didn't show you before. Okay, so again, I'm putting my paper down slowly. Really, for the sake of your blankets, you should be using a piece of newsprint on top of your printing paper. I mean, the Rosa Spina is a very good quality paper. I'm not getting any bleeding through, but you know, blankets are expensive and they can be washed, but it's a make-work project. So if you can protect the blankets from ink that might bleed through or any of the sizing that might come off the paper, it's a good idea to do that. So I just put my newsprint substitute on top. Okay, and then the same process. And back. And again, I don't want to go to an inch. Looks about right. Okay. Okay. Well, that still might be a little darker than I would have liked, but not bad. Not bad, and I'm pretty happy with the registration there. So let's get that little guy out of the way. I'll give it a quick wipe. Oh, what am I saying? I've got more to clean up than that. There's a little bit of transfer of ink from the paper back onto the acetate because of the pressure of the press. So just gonna try and get rid of the worst of that. Again, probably not strictly necessary, given the fact that the paper isn't budging on me at all. And I will say that the Lysol wipe was kind of convenient, and it meant I didn't have to pack. You know, I'm kind of using it in a multi-purpose way, but I think the Windex is probably superior for this. Okay. Now the moment we've all been waiting for. What did I do with my little... Ah, there it is. Okay. I think that's about as good as I can make it. So one more time. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Now, because I'm done, I can actually release my paper, and you can see the finished print. Yeah, so, you know, I think with that textured ring, it's all relative. And I think, you know, I don't know if you remember art classes where they would show you one color juxtaposed with another, and your perception of the colors change depending on what the adjacent color is like. And so I think I think I'm actually reasonably satisfied with that textured ring, just because of the intensity of the black of the silhouette and some of the other colors. So yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that. So the last thing, because I was working with damp paper, I'd like this paper to dry flat, if at all possible. So it's worth investing in a little cork board. I brought this one with me, and I'm just going to pin my print to the board. To encourage it to dry flat. Yeah. So that is the printing of Galaxie. I don't know that I mentioned this before, but one nice thing about printmaking is that you can make more than one. And that's something that I really like to do. I think I may make a few of these for family members for sure. So yeah, I guess in parting, I would encourage you to try your hand at printmaking if what you saw here today intrigued you. I find we tend to I think a lot of it is personality based. We tend to gravitate towards the techniques and the mediums that just kind of fit with our personal makeups. I'm using printmaking to express myself today. If I liken the medium to a language, it's one that I'm really fluent in, and so it makes sense for me to use it to tell the story that I want to tell. But you could certainly use a lot of these techniques, like keeping an image file and making connections, journaling, those kinds of things have a broader applicability. So in fact, I think some of the things that I've been doing would be ideally suited to collage, for instance. So use the medium that suits you best, is what I would say. So thank you for your kind attention today, and I will spare you the tedium of me cleaning up. Nobody wants to see that. Even I don't really want to see that. It's a lot of work. But thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope I see you again. Bye for now.